When I was 9, there was a woman who used to wave at me from the same parked car every morning before school. This was in Knoxville, Tennessee, when my mom and I lived in a small rental house near the edge of town. I got picked up by the bus at the entrance to our neighborhood. Most mornings, my mom watched from the porch until it came. If she had already left for work, I stood there alone. That's when I started noticing the car. It was an older white sedan parked across the street from the bus stop, usually in the same spot. At first, I didn't think much of it, but after a while I realized the same car was there a lot. And after the car started feeling normal, the woman inside it did too. She looked like she was in her 40s. Brown hair, big sunglasses, always smiling. The first time she waved, I thought she had to be waving at someone else. But there was nobody there, so I waved back. After that, it became a pattern. If her car was there, she'd wave. Sometimes she rolled the window down and said good morning, just friendly enough that it didn't set off alarms. The first time she really talked to me was on a rainy morning when the bus was late. She asked what grade I was in and whether I liked my teacher. I answered, because when you're that age, random adults asking questions still feels normal if they sound nice. After that, she talked more. Little things. Did I still bring that blue backpack every day? Did my mom still make me wear that red raincoat? At the time, it felt like she just noticed things. One morning, she held out a juice box and asked if I wanted it. I actually stepped toward the curb before the middle school kid from down the street told me not to. He said, "Don't take stuff from people." She laughed and said, "He's smarter than you," then drove off. That should have been enough, but I didn't tell my mom. It didn't feel like one big scary thing. The part I remember most clearly happened near the end of fall. It was still dark when I got to the bus stop, and the white car was already there. Only this time, it wasn't across the street. It was pulled up right beside the mailboxes. The woman rolled down her window, smiled, and said, "Your mom left earlier than usual today." I just stared at her, because she was right. My mom had left early that morning. I asked how she knew that. She smiled and said, "I notice things." Then she asked if I wanted to sit in the car until the bus came. I said no. Not because I fully understood what was happening, but because the way she asked it made something in me feel wrong for the first time. I took a few steps back. She kept smiling and said, "That's okay, maybe tomorrow." Right then, a pickup truck came around the corner and slowed down behind her car. It was one of my neighbors leaving for work. The woman looked in her mirror, rolled up the window, and drove off. When I got home that afternoon, my mom was waiting at the kitchen table. The neighbor had seen me talking to the woman and told her. When my mom asked how long the woman had been showing up, I told her the truth. A while. Then she started asking the kind of questions adults ask when they're trying not to panic. Did she ever say my name? Did I ever get in the car? The next morning, my mom drove me to school. For about a week, she took a different route every time, like she was checking to see if someone was following us. After that, the white car never came back. It didn't come back until years later. I was in my 20s when something on the local news triggered it. They were doing an anniversary story about an old attempted child abduction. The reporter said multiple kids in nearby neighborhoods had reported seeing a woman in a white sedan talking to them near bus stops. I asked my mom if that had anything to do with the woman from my bus stop. She got quiet, then said yes. Apparently there had been other reports. Same type of car, same pattern. Waving first, then small talk, then offers to get in the car. My mom told me one of the reasons she moved us out of that rental the next spring was because she couldn't stand knowing someone had been watching our street long enough to learn our routine. That was the part that hit me hardest. Not that the woman had talked to me, it was that she had watched long enough to know which mornings I was alone. She knew what backpack I carried. She knew when my mom was home and when she wasn't. And the creepiest part is that, in my actual childhood memory, she doesn't feel dangerous. She just feels familiar. At 9 years old, I thought she was just a nice woman who happened to be parked near the bus stop a lot. Now I know she was probably practicing, testing which kids would wave back, seeing who answered questions. And even now, anytime I pass a school bus stop and see a car parked too close for too long, I think of that white sedan and how easy it is for danger to look harmless when it smiles first. When I was 8, I used to hear tapping under the vent beside my bed. This was in Fort Wayne, Indiana, when my dad rented the bottom half of an old duplex after my parents split up. I only stayed there every other weekend, and my room was the smaller one at the back. It had one narrow window facing the side yard and an old metal floor vent right beside the bed. The place was old enough that nothing in it was quiet. The heat clicked, the pipes knocked, the floorboards popped at night. So when I first heard the tapping, I didn't think much of it. It would happen after I was already in bed. 3 soft taps, then silence. then maybe one more. At first I figured it was the heater coming on, or maybe my dad moving things around in the basement. But after a while I noticed something. It only happened when I was in that room, and if I sat up it would stop. Then a few minutes later it would start again. One night I leaned over the side of the bed and put my hand over the vent. I could feel warm air coming through it, but under that I heard something else. A light scratching sound, like a fingernail dragging once across the metal. I pulled my hand back so fast I almost fell out of bed. The next morning I told my dad there was something in the vent. He laughed and told me it was probably the house settling. That was his answer for everything in that place. Old house, old pipes, old wood, so I stopped bringing it up. But the tapping kept happening. Some nights it was 1 or 2 taps. Other nights it was enough to wake me up. I started sleeping with the TV on because I hated how quiet the room got once the house settled down. There was one night I remember more clearly than the others. I woke up sometime after midnight because I heard the tapping again. Not on the vent this time, under it, like it was coming from inside the floor. I stayed completely still, listening. Then I heard something that made my whole body go cold. A voice, not clear, not a sentence, just the sound of somebody whispering too low to make out words. I yelled for my dad right away. He came in half asleep and turned on the lamp. I told him somebody was under my room. He checked the closet, looked under the bed, even opened the window and looked outside. Then he stood on the vent and said, "See, nobody's under there." I remember crying and telling him I didn't want to sleep in that room. That was one of the only times he didn't argue. He let me sleep on the couch. After that, I stopped using that bedroom as much. If I stayed over, I'd either pretend I fell asleep watching TV or find an excuse not to sleep back there. A few weeks later, my dad started acting different, more tense. He started locking the basement door at night. Once, when he thought I was asleep, I heard him downstairs talking to somebody in a low voice near the back entrance. Then one weekend I showed up, and half the basement ceiling under my bedroom had been opened up. Insulation was hanging down, 2 vent covers were off, and my dad had moved my mattress into the other room. I asked what happened. He told me there had been a plumbing issue. I knew that was a lie. I never slept in that room again. A month or 2 later, he moved out of the duplex completely. At the time, I thought he just hated the place. It didn't make sense until years later. I was in my 20s when I mentioned that duplex to my dad and joked about the tapping in the floor vent. He got quiet right away. Then he finally told me what had happened. The duplex had a crawl space that ran under both units and connected to the basement through an access opening behind an old storage shelf. Around the same time I started complaining about the tapping, the woman in the upstairs unit began reporting missing things. Nothing major. A flashlight, batteries, kids' snacks, loose cash from a kitchen drawer. Then one night she heard somebody moving around inside the walls near her son's room. That led the landlord to open part of the basement ceiling and check the space around the vents and floor joists. They found blankets, food wrappers, cigarette butts, and a plastic crate full of things taken from both units. My dad said there was also a flashlight in the crawl space directly under my bedroom. That's why he moved my mattress the same day. Then he told me the part that still gets to me. One of the vent grates in my room had scratch marks on the underside, like somebody had been reaching up and touching it from below. They never found the person who had been staying in that crawl space. By the time the landlord called police, whoever it was had already disappeared. And for years, one of my clearest childhood memories was just lying in bed in that little room, hearing soft taps under the vent and thinking maybe it was the heat coming on. Now I know better. It wasn't the house making noise. It was somebody under the floor, close enough to hear me moving around in bed. When I was 7, I thought the man in our apartment laundry room was just another tenant. This was in Dayton, Ohio, when my mom, my older sister, and I lived in a rundown brick apartment building near a busy road. My mom worked late a lot, so my sister usually had to drag me with her whenever she did laundry in the basement. I hated going down there. The basement smelled like detergent, damp concrete, and something metallic I couldn't place. Half the fluorescent lights buzzed, and the washers shook so hard they made the whole room feel like it was vibrating. But there was one reason I didn't complain as much after a while. There was a man down there sometimes. I never knew his real name. In my head, I called him Mr. Ray. He was older, maybe in his 50s, skinny, always wearing the same dark coat, and he smelled like cigarettes and peppermint. He usually sat near the folding table by the vending machine with his hands in his pockets like he was waiting for someone. The weird thing is I don't remember ever being introduced to him. He just started talking to me one day, like he already knew me. He asked if I was helping my sister with laundry. He asked if I liked school. He asked if I still slept with the hallway light on. At the time, none of that felt strange. When you're 7, adults just seem like they know things. He was never loud, never aggressive. If anything, he seemed calm in a way that made him easy to trust. Once, when the vending machine ate one of my quarters, he handed me another one and told me not to tell my sister because she'd say candy before bed would ruin my teeth. The first time I brought him up to my mom, she assumed he lived in the building. She asked what apartment he was in and I told her I didn't know. She just said, then don't talk to him. But I kept seeing him, not every time, just enough that it felt normal. Sometimes he'd sit by the folding table, sometimes near the boilers farther down the basement hallway where the lights were dimmer. One night, while my sister was moving clothes from one washer to a dryer, Mr. Ray leaned down and asked if my mom still got home after the 10 o'clock news. I shrugged and said sometimes. Then he smiled and said, I can always tell when she gets back. Her car makes that little squeak when she locks it. At the time, I didn't think anything of it, but when I repeated that to my mom later, her face changed. Not full panic, just enough to tell me she didn't like hearing it. She asked exactly what he looked like, and after that, she stopped letting my sister take me to the basement at night. A couple weeks later, I woke up one night because my mom and sister were talking in the kitchen in that low, tense voice adults use when they don't want kids hearing. The next morning, there were police cars outside the building. I saw one officer carrying a flashlight into the side basement entrance. I saw our landlord talking with them. Later that day, my mom packed 2 duffel bags and told us we were staying with my aunt for a few days. We never went back. We moved out before the end of the month. At 7, I didn't think much about it after a while. Kids get used to adults making sudden decisions. It wasn't until years later, when I was in my 20s, that I asked my mom why we had moved out so fast. She got quiet, then asked if I remembered the man from the basement. The second she said that, I knew exactly who she meant. Mr. Ray. She told me there was no tenant in the building who looked like that, no maintenance worker either. The police found a sleeping bag, food wrappers, and clothes in a locked boiler room off the basement corridor. Somebody had been staying down there for weeks, maybe longer. According to one of the downstairs tenants, small things had been going missing from laundry baskets and storage cages. A shirt, loose change, a flashlight, the kind of things people shrug off. Then my mom told me the part that still bothers me now. The police believed whoever had been living down there knew the tenants' routines, who left early, who got home late, who had kids, which apartments were usually quiet. And when my mom told them about the man I kept describing, one of the officers said he was probably the reason they figured out who they were looking for in the first place. They never caught him. There was no ending where they found him hiding somewhere dramatic. He was just gone. And for years, one of my clearest childhood memories was just this skinny man in a dark coat giving me quarters by the vending machine and asking harmless little questions. That's what bothers me now. Not that he scared me, it's that he didn't. At 7 years old, I thought he was just another adult in the building. Now I know he was a stranger who knew exactly when my mom came home at night, and I have no idea how long he had been watching us before I ever noticed him at all.